Welcome to this special edition of the Fly Culture Podcast. Here's not your host, Pete Tyjas.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are listening. Welcome to the Fly Culture Podcast. As you may have gathered, I am not Pete Tyjas. I am Ben Jailer, occasional contributor to Fly Culture, author of Fish Can Fail and avoider of werewolves. Now, with Fly Culture celebrating its 5th birthday and the podcast racking up its 200th episode, I thought it would be interesting to turn the tables on Pete and get to know a bit more about the man, the myth and the legend behind the magazine. So Pete, welcome to your Fly Culture Podcast. How are you feeling about being interviewed?
This is weird beyond belief. I'm strangely not prepared, which I've always have notes and I'm always sort of know what I'm going to ask, or I have an idea of what I'm going to ask. So it's really peculiar being this side of things. Thank you for suggesting this. And I know when you phoned me a few weeks ago, as you well know, I wasn't 100% sure, but I think you're absolutely the perfect person to do this. And I'm thrilled to be in your safe hands today.
Now, Pete, I just got to warn you, because obviously there's a lot of love between us. And the one thing we agreed on, that this wasn't going to, turn into some kind of, loving. So in the event that this does get a bit too mushy, you're going to hear this. You're going to hear this sound, okay? But hopefully we can avoid that. But we've got to keep that kind of, love and respect down. If not, the lovinometer is going to sound, I'm afraid. So first question, a little bit left field, but what superpower would you most like to have?
Now, that's a good one. I think the obvious one would probably be flying. But wouldn't it be cool to be able to look into water and see the fish? And so I was talking to, I was fishing actually in Wales. I was seeing off the end of the season with my friend Paul yesterday in Wales. And we talked about being able to, with salmon, you've got to keep the faith, as we often say. And we were saying, I bet the fly's passing over fish, but wouldn't it be cool to be able to see into a pool in some way? So I suppose it's not X-ray vision, it's super polarized vision of some form, that I could look into a pool and see fish and then have a little bit of an idea. I'd feel better about my salmon fishing as well. So if they were fishing the pool, I could blame myself even more if that's possible. So I think that's probably what I'd aim for.
Okay. A little bit left field again, Pete, but we both share a love of horror films and horror TV series. Now, I know a show you really enjoyed was called Midnight Mass on Netflix. Can you just kind of share your impressions of the show with me, with or without spoilers, and what it was that stood out for you about that series?
I think the thing for me, and if listeners haven't heard it, Midnight Mass is, well, I'm going to give a spoiler away, I guess, but it is about a church on a remote island just off the coast of the US. And it is about a vicar who comes to the community. And there is quite a big twist to it. And as you said, we're fans of the horror genre and particularly the vampire genre. And I think that comes from me, as we've talked about many times before, about Salem's Lot and growing up as a kid, and Danny Glick scratching his claws against the window frightened the life out of me. And this sort of has a vampire twist to it, which comes completely out of left field and takes you to where you think you're going to find a hero, and then you sort of lose the hero really quickly. And I like the way that it continually evolved and took the story and almost made all of the members of the island who were realizing what was going on there the heroes, and sometimes it would only be for a brief time. And even the way that it ended was that way. And I thought it was very clever how it was done, because I know that your background is from films and screenwriting and TV, and I guess there could almost be a formula in some respects. And this, to me, felt as though it took the formula and sort of changed it a little bit. and bent the rules or stretched the rules a little bit. And I really enjoyed it. The soundtrack was beautiful as well. It was beautifully filmed. And they sort of keep, a la Salem's Lot as well, they keep the main protagonist, the villain, as it were, away from you for quite some time. And I kind of like that aspect of it as well. So, yeah, like you say, left field, and I like being out there.
Okay, because, I mean, if you remember, I started watching that probably about 18 months ago, and I got 2 episodes into it, and it just didn't do it for me. You know, I think for me with a box set, you invest in such a big amount of time into it. For me, it's really got to hit its straps quickly. I found it pedestrian, cliche. Nothing was happening. I didn't know what it was about, and I gave up on it. And then about 18 months after that, you know, during a call, you mentioned that you watched it and recommended it to me. So I think it was just before I was going up to a synth to, you know, do my house sitting thing. So while I was up there, I revisited it, stayed with it, watched it to the end. And, you know, as you said, it's probably one of the best pieces of, you know, TV I've watched in a long time, you know, right up there with, you know, Succession, with Mad Men, with Sopranos, you know, that kind of quality. But it's interesting you said that you thought your superpower, the superpower was the ability to see fish. Because I think you've already got that as well. Because when we've been fishing together, you know, I'm walking past water that I think is too shallow, is too fast to hold fish, or too overgrown to get a fly into. And you're saying, try here, try this, you know, foam is home. And I'm picking up fish in places where I just didn't think they existed. And I think similarly, I can't remember if I told you this, Pete, but, you know, you mentioned I used to write, you know, screenplays and video games, but probably about 5-6 years ago, I'd given up. I'd had enough, jacked it in. And then I had that weird experience when I was fishing where over the space of 6 different trips over about maybe about sort of 2 or 3 months, I hooked and dropped 8 fish in a row. Now I'd come across Eat, Sleep, Fish, your kind of online easing. So I just wrote an article about this, had no expectations, sent it to you, and you published it straight away, which was really kind of encouraging for me. And then when you launched Fly Culture, you asked me to come up with something, and that was great. I wrote it, and, you know, from there, you know, I'm now sort of regularly contributing to a number of magazines, both in the UK and US. And I think, you know, your superpower, Pete, is you have this innate ability to spot things that other people don't. You know, with Midnight Mass, with the way you develop writers, you know, with your amazing guiding skills. So I'm going to set the
get it going now. Yeah, press it.
What all this is leading to for me, Pete, I think that ability where you can spot things, is that something that led to you to create Fly Culture? You know, people were saying print is dead, you're crazy to launch a magazine, but you kind of saw something there, and you had a conviction to pursue it. Do you think it sort of came out of that? The launch of the magazine sort of came out of that?
I think there's an element of it. I'm always looking to push both myself, and I sort of came from when I was younger, you know, teachers at school and stuff, you'll never be able to do this, or you know, you're not going to be able to do anything. And I had teachers who were kind of trying to just get through the day, really, and didn't inspire me and in the way that they could have done or should have done, yet they inspired me in a different way to say, well, actually, I'm going to try these things. And throughout my life, I've tried to do that. And interestingly, again, a conversation I had recently, we said to our daughter, no one's going to stop you doing anything. You can at least try it. And I think even when we were running the fishing school with the guides, we'd always say, if the fishing was tough, back yourself and have belief and have faith. I don't know that it's any sort of form of superpower. I would much prefer to be able to see fish, I have to say. But I think it felt the time was right from that point of view. And with Eat, Sleep, Fish, we'd built that quite significantly. And again, with many of these things, I never talk about, how well, how many, how big, whatever it may be. But Eat Sleep Fish had a very sizable following. And I'd been consistently thinking, right, should we do an end of year journal? Should we do this? Should we try that? Just to see. And I've been so influenced by American publications like the Drake and Fly Fish Journal, and of course also trout and salmon and fly fishing, fly tying. And I liked when I first saw the Drake. That was the inspiration for starting Eat Sleep Fish in some respects, only because they were looking at fishing as a whole, and rather than concentrating on this is, the fly, this is the gear, this is whatever that may be, I kind of liked that. And that's how Eat Sleep Fish, came about as a result of that. And then it is just simply, it felt time. I just wanted to try it. And, as we'd said at the beginning of the current fly culture, swimming against the flow, and that background of print not being seen as viable was interesting for me to try and explore. And so, right, can we actually do something? Now, we were very lucky that there was this sizable readership, and I've always tried to be transparent about these things without sort of boasting, I guess, in some respects. But we used to get between 20 and 25,000 readers, unique readers of Eat Sleep Fish per month. And so I knew there was sort of an appetite for what we were writing about, and it was thrilling to break writers like yourself and Boo and Chad and many, many others who've gone to write. There's nothing prouder when, you said you were appearing in Fly Fish Journal, and Johannes recently said he was in the Drake. Those sorts of things are absolutely thrilling for me, because they're places that I like and respect so much. And so it felt to me that we had something, the germ of something. And of course, it's easy when you're giving something away for free. We didn't make a penny out of it. I didn't want anything out of it. But when you want to charge people for something, there is a different ball game, and that is completely different. But we felt there was the background for it. And when we just softly said, right, well, we're going to bring something out, I was amazed by how people got behind what we were trying to do, really.
Okay, that's really cool. And Pete, can you just sort of guide us through, how do you go about creating a particular issue? Do you have a theme, or are you looking for a sort of balance of content? How do you go about creating that?
It's I'm fortunate that we have a fair bit of content, and that's great. And so what we try and do is, when somebody sends an article, I read it really, really quickly. And if it grabs me, it's in. Now, there may be some tweaks that need to be done. We try and help and encourage as much as we possibly can with writers who haven't done this sort of thing before. And that's really important, to give them a showcase and the confidence to have a go at these things. And so I have a fair bit of content, and I sort of kind of like the idea of almost being a DJ in some respects, that you're thinking about the rhythm and tempo of the magazine. How's it going to open? How's it going to end? What's going to fit within that? But the framework is, it's really gut more than anything else, right? This will fit with there, because I didn't really want to go down, and even I'm looking at the covers for the winter edition now. We've had a sort of a chillier theme to it on previous covers, but I'm kind of thinking, right, well, we only have 4 a year. Do we have to really go down that route? And the important thing for me is that we have a mixture of articles, so that readers don't have any idea what they're going to get. And so it may be a different writer. It may be the same that's appearing in 2, because it's in context and it works really well for that issue. But sometimes it might not be. It may be. So I want people to say, right, each one is separate in its own right. Each one has its own place on the bookshelf and is completely different. So that's what I work. Sometimes we have fish art in there. Sometimes we have 6 of the best. What I try and do is pack it with as much as I possibly can, so that there is a lot in there. So we don't have filler. There is absolutely no filler in there. If I could put more content in, I probably would, but keeping it to 100 pages, I think is about right and works well from that point of view.
Pete, I mean, the imagery you choose for the covers are absolutely stunning. Is that do you start at the start? Is that your start for the issue? You choose your cover photo first and kind of work through it from there, or?
Not really, no. And at the moment, I'm not 100% on the cover that we're going to have for the winter one. I've got an idea of something, yet everything else is in place. So the magazine is done, and I'll actually start. It's really funny because people say, "Oh, what about that article from whatever issue?" And I'm like 1 or 2 issues ahead. So we have enough content that I'm working consistently. In the spring one, I will start working on. So it doesn't have to be about the opening of Rivers. Yeah, I'll have a vaguish sort of theme in there, but it won't be a very clear one from that point of view. So sometimes, and I'm talking to somebody about the cover for the spring one, which I've got in my mind, that's where it will be. But I'm trying to keep it as flexible as I possibly can. And even with articles, and sometimes, I'll get messages from people saying, "Oh, will my article be appearing?" Yes, it will. If I've said yes to it, it will. But we've got only 4 issues a year, so I've got to fit those in. So I do my utmost, and I know Jeff was in the current issue, Jeff, and I saw him at the BFFI, and he said, "Will it be appearing?" I said, "I promise you it will." But there's a right time, and it seemed to me it was about fishing with his sons, and it was the right time for that article to be in there. So that felt the right time for it. So that's when it went in. And it may be I suddenly pull something at the last minute and think, no, it doesn't feel right. It's the whole process for me is gut and feel more than anything else, and the rhythm and of how it actually reads, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And I guess a big side of it is just physically the logistics involved in producing a high quality print magazine, getting that dispatched across the UK, over the world. Can you just give us an idea of the sort of the scope and size of the operation and what's physically involved in, once you've put the mag together, getting that print, getting all the sort of nitty gritty stuff?
It can be sort of, nice saying you're running a fishing magazine, and that's great. The magazine goes out and people say nice things and everyone's happy, but it's everything else that doesn't sort of hit the front that people see. So I do all of the social media. So I'm doing that, and I might do that 3 or 4 times a week, dependent. And sometimes, there may be a little bit more, there may be a little bit less. So I'm doing that. I've just done the accounts last week. So I've had to do that. That's gone off to the accountant. I look after contributors. I've been away for a couple of days. So I've been writing back to contributors, people who are going to be doing the front cover, stuff like that. There is the physical putting it together, which takes a bit of time as well. And then there's the process of what we've tried to do is, and again, being transparent about things, costs have risen dramatically in the 5 years, paper costs, postage costs, everything else. So what I try to do is keep cost to a minimum so that doesn't impact the end user. I will do everything I possibly can continually to make that price stay exactly where it is. So when the magazine arrives, Emma and I, will take the boxes, we unpack them. In the week beforehand, I've been printing out labels for everyone. So all of our subscribers, and then the pre-sales as well, so that we can put those in together. So the boxes arrive, we have to carry those in, unpack them, pack them into envelopes, repackage them, because what we do next is that it goes off to a distributor, and the distributor then sends them out, because I think the printer could do everything, but again, it becomes slightly more expensive. So my main aim is to make sure I keep those costs as minimal. And then what we're continually doing, we've got overseas ones. So that distributor doesn't send them to overseas. Our current post office, and it's a counter one, hates us because there will be a bunch. And we're very fortunate, we sell...
You're the magazine equivalent of the guy from the Penny Arcade.
You're exactly right there. You can see them, and we've actually fallen out a little bit at the moment. We were thrilled when the post office said that our post lady, Charmaine, who we know really, really well, can pick them up. So you can print out the label or you can book slots. And then basically what happens is that she'll collect them because we're continually selling magazines throughout the process. So a bunch of them went out today that were just sales that went to the US and everywhere else. But so we sell them to US, we sell them to just about anywhere in Europe. We've sold them to places like China. We sell them to Australia. We have a good fan base in Australia. Some, not many to New Zealand, actually, now I'm thinking about it, but Scandinavia particularly is really strong for us. France, Germany, just about anywhere. And so those have to go out, and there's a big stack of those has to go out. So we release those. What happens is when the magazine goes off, the UK ones go to distributor. That takes a few days to filter through. So that gives us a bit of time to let those other ones, so we can release those in bunches, more manageable bunches, rather than boxes appearing. So we tried to look after the post office as best we could, but we found this way works better for us, and it's slightly more streamlined and makes everyone happy, I think, as well.
Okay. And what about the kind of relationship with the readers? What sort of feedback are you getting from people? And, maybe sort of using any suggestions or anything like that? Is it very much a sort of two-way process?
Absolutely. And I listen and reply to everybody, and they'll know that, even if they're changing addresses. And so I will speak to them and keep in touch with them from that point of view. We've never asked for people to write something nice. We've never asked anyone to put something on Instagram or Facebook. And that is deeply humbling and deeply pleasing. When you see people do that, I'm still staggered when I see that sort of stuff. And people, even now, 5 years down the line, saying there's a new magazine come out. And I try and share that with people, but we've never asked anyone to do that. And that's a wonderful thing to be able to do. From a subscriber point of view, we've kept many. And we've lost very, very few, and some maybe, they're not fishing anymore, or it was a birthday present. And I've been staggered by that. And that means the world to me. And when those resubscriptions come through, and I always think, somebody's going to write and say, I don't want it anymore. And people still stick with you. It's amazing. And it sort of tells you perhaps we've tapped into a vein of fly anglers, and that's deeply humbling when you see that, and very moving actually when you see that and people are enjoying it. So yeah, I do everything I can to speak to people. So I don't know if people think there's some huge office block, and there isn't. It's usually me or Emma that they'll speak to on an email, and they'll get a reply pretty damn quickly as well.
And I think it's kind of ripples in the pond, because I think another side of it is the kind of the brother and sisterhood, the social side of it, bringing people together, who have things in common based around, fly culture and fly fishing, and the social events you've done. And, me, myself, the people I've met through the magazine, kind of readers and other writers, traveling around the country and going fishing. Is that something that kind of gives you sort of pleasure, that you've kind of, almost like you sort of create those bonds, or those bonds have resulted from what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. And we call it the family, or the fly culture family, or communities are really important to me and always have done. And I've tried to promote those in whatever sphere. And when I was guiding, it's a lovely story. I took a group down to Montana, and sometimes people are a bit anxious when they go on these trips. And so I thought, right, I knew them all. We're all a similar age group. And so I decided we'd get together. And so we had a get together, we fished, so that when everyone met at the airport, everyone was chatting away and getting on really, really well. And still, that must have been 12, 13 years ago. That group still goes away together on trips. It would be lovely if they invited me every now and again. But they do. And I saw two of them not that long ago. And that, to me, is really, really important. And with the mag, those dues that we've had, Farlow's at Orvis, Malin and Green have been great. And, again, we just put a little something out if you want to come along. And you're sometimes thinking of, on as you well know, a wet, miserable January, I think it was, in Stockbridge. You're sort of sitting there with your fingers crossed, hoping people will come, and they did. And I had a suspicion they would. And that's wonderful to be able to connect those people. And as you say, as a result of it, friendships form, fishing ones, long-standing friendships. And they've been really important to me to get people together, to get people talking, fishing, and everything that goes with it, really.
Yeah, I think with the Stockbridge one, my main hope that I was going to be able to find a kebab shop or a takeaway when the event finished after we went to the pub. But yeah, we never did, and we ended up in a Airbnb with Dan and John. I think we ended up eating noodles and energy bars. But no, it was a good time, and we were there because of the magazine and the friendships that had been formed through that. So that was awesome. So aside from the sort of community aspect, what else gives you? Where else do you take pleasure from with regards to the magazine? Is it physically seeing the fruits of your labour, a mint fresh copy of the magazine on a coffee table, or is it sort of other aspects that touch you?
That's a great question and something I'd not really thought about. The process, and I'm a worrier. I think everything through on many levels, and even when any issue comes out, I don't sleep until I've seen it's hit the streets, so it's arrived with people. I worry about that, and then I worry that people will like it like I've liked it, because there is pressure. You're putting your name on it. You're putting your head above the parapet, and you just hope people feel the way that you do about it. So there's that aspect of it. There is the aspect of it when you're seeing those things on social media that people are enjoying it, and you think, yes, great. And then I'm almost sort of desensitized to that one, and I've moved on to the next one, and I start worrying about that one and think, right, okay, how are we going to keep this going? And I don't look at the old magazines at all, not because I don't want to, but because I've got to keep looking forward. And I think that's the only way that you do it. I don't want to be formulaic, and I don't want to I'm looking for ways to continually look at things with fresh eyes and hopefully make it interesting for end user and keep readers entertained, really. All I care about is contributors and readers. That's all I care about within this whole process.
Okay, fantastic. Well, that's been good talking about the magazine, but should we talk about fishing a bit, because this is a fishing podcast, you think? And
yeah, too right.
Hey, so what's your perfect day's fishing? Where are you? What species are you targeting? What's your method? And I guess, are you fishing alone or with company?
I don't care where I am. And there's a mixture of things. I will go for whatever. If somebody, as I said, my friend Paul said, oh, I'm heading over to Wales to knock the last days of the season out, I'll be over there. And that's a little tradition that started to form. We're only 2 years into it. The first year, the river came up about 5 feet overnight. So that was it. So it doesn't really matter where it is. I think trout are my first love. And I think they always will be. But if I'm fishing with Emma, she's not a trout angler. And when we salmon fish, and that moment, I remember her catching her first salmon. We both cried. And I remember the one she caught this year, and it's been so hard. And I think it's just been a crap season for everyone. I'm hoping it's just one of those crap seasons. I know we're in a down cycle, but I'm hoping it's just a crap season for whatever that reason was. But
I've got a confession to make. I did have a chat with Emma in the lead up to this podcast, and she told me that the reason you cried when she caught her first salmon because it was so much bigger than anything you've ever caught.
And that's exactly right. And as a result of that, I spent most of my salmon fishing career netting fish for her as well. And that makes me so happy. That makes me really happy. But so we have some wonderful days, and we were talking about, trips and things like that earlier. And I said that I'd much rather go on a trip with you if you're doing something you'd really like to do. And we talked about salmon wherever it may be. And I really enjoy that aspect of it as well, and seeing how it's got her so excited, and even a tug from a fish will make her shake with excitement. That's enough. I learn a lot from her. I've done a lot of fishing, and I've been around fishing a long time, but her mindset to fishing is a wonderful one that I learn from. But also, the people when I fish with you, I love that. And the day we had on your Mystery Gentleman's Lake X was amazing. It's those moments that are extremely special for me, and I like sharing them. But sometimes I felt, since I've stopped guiding, that I actually really enjoy fishing on my own as well. And it may be me and the dog, but I found that those moments can be great in a different way, and it won't be a day's fishing. It may be, right, we found a fish rising, I've caught it, and very often I'll just snip off and go home. That's fine. It's not, I guess you could almost look at it as a top up, and it just tops you up a little bit. And it may be half an hour, it may be 2 hours, it might be 4 hours. I don't know. But then you feel refreshed, revived, and everything else that goes with it, and you all of a sudden think, yep, that's fine, and I'll snip off and I'll go home. And there'll be a time, but I think those moments, and our mutual friend John and our wonderful designer John, he said he came down and he brought a beautiful lunch. He said, well, it was really lunch with some fishing either side of it. And it is, and what I've tried to do with this is get people to connect with other people, to fish and spend time with other people, but it's not about the fish always. It's great. And sometimes there are days, aren't there, that you want to go out and you want to catch a few fish, and you get that sort of, and I get that as well. And I'm lucky, and I'm always careful how I say this, because somebody kicked me once and said, well, you're lucky you get to fish every day. And they're dead right, or not every day, but a fair bit. And I get to fish a fair bit. So for me, it's really, really nice to spend that time with people. And if I'm with Warren, we'll smoke a cigar, or he'll get his pipe out, or as we've done, we've chatted about stuff. It might be lunch. It might be all those things that go with it that make it. And I don't think it is a maturity thing. It's a culture thing. So it is what fishing is about. And it can mean different things to different people, and I get that. But to me, it's that big thing. I get excited about getting into the car, and I recently did this soundtrack thing that people can listen to. And I remember driving to fishing, listening to Quadrophenia or whatever it may be, and getting excited as part of that process. It may be loading your car up, getting ready. Sometimes I'll have my car packed 2 days before I'm going somewhere because I'm so excited, and I'm old enough to know better. And that's that pull of fishing for me. So is there somewhere I'd rather go? I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. It would change all of the time, because it might be where I'm heading on that trip. It may be going down to the River Tour here. It may be going to Dartmoor. It may be, when we were in Italy recently, it may be Montana. It could be anywhere. It's all good. And I enjoy each aspect of it for a multitude of reasons, but many of them are probably the same when you scratch underneath the surface.
It was really interesting what you said about the difference between fishing alone and fishing with people. It almost sounded like, in a sort of positively selfish way, when you fish alone, it's kind of like mainlining. Do you know what I mean? Whatever the effect the fishing first had on you that got you into it and got you hooked, you're getting that pure, unadulterated hit. Is that sort of describing what you feel, Pete, when you go fishing by yourself?
I think you're dead right. And the hit, or the top up, as I said, that is definitely part of it. And I definitely fish better. And I ask this question a lot of people. I definitely fish better on my own. I don't stuff fish so much. I've noticed with that. And I think part of that is because you're probably midway in conversation. I'm very much a sociable angler. I don't need to, if someone's fishing a nice pool, I'll sit and watch and cheer them on. I don't say anything now. I don't go into full MacGuidey mode or that. So I don't say really much at all, and just enjoy that. And I think for me, it fascinates me, that competition aspect of it, because I fish because it's not competitive. So I don't want to catch more fish than anyone else. And I know these things, if you fish with somebody regularly enough, it evens out anyway. It doesn't matter. And I take pleasure in if someone else catches a fish or I catch a fish, I don't mind in the slightest. That doesn't bother me. I don't feel, right, I've got to go and catch one. So I don't mind that. I don't mind my arse getting kicked by fish, and certainly salmon this year, they've consistently kicked my arse. So I'm getting used to that, but I don't mind. It doesn't bother me. So I don't need to catch every fish in the pool. I don't particularly want to be honest. So it doesn't matter from that point of view. I don't know it's a Zen level that you reach to or a higher level. I think I've always probably been that way. I've not been a competitive person. As I said, the reason I do it is because it's not competitive. That's why I love it so much.
And what about your local waters, Pete? Because when you sort of moved to that area, did you know the fishing that was available there? Was it a conscious decision to go to that particular place, or was it somewhere you went and then discovered kind of what was on offer?
You may think it's a spooky coincidence that I live between Dartmoor and Exmoor. That means because there's lots of streams there. So that had something to do with it, to a dramatic event. There wasn't much of an internet then. And the nearest town to me, about 6-7 miles away, is Crediton. And I happened to put a search in this thing called Google that was relatively new, and put in Crediton and fly fishing, and nearly passed out when I saw there was a Crediton fly fishing club. And they had a section of the tour which is approximately 5 minutes, 37 seconds from where I live. So that was where I did a hell of a lot of my fishing. And then, of course, there's Dartmoor as well, which is, I've eulogized about it many times on this podcast about how wonderful it is, what a game changer it is from a fishing point of view. So it was very much in my mind that I wanted to be somewhere near where there was fishing. And I think Devon ticked those boxes. I'm not a snob about anything, but I do like wild fish. And there are very few places that you're going to catch stockfish in Devon as well. So it was just the mixture of fishing, the amount of fishing, and yeah, it's beautiful. And I often say I've died and gone to Devon.
and, and was there a particular gentleman or a book that was kind of that influenced you in terms of where you made the decision to move down there and sort of go into fishing?
Absolutely, yeah. I've talked about it a little bit. I may have even mentioned it on here, and apologies to listeners if I have. But The Pursuit of Wild Trout by Mike Weaver, and that book turned up, and there was a picture of him standing on Cherry Brook in a big rock. I know exactly where it is, and I said to him, yes, and that was it. And I got to know Mike. I catch fish for his articles, and never told him the impact he had. And then we happened to be on the tour actually, and we'd done an article, and he was passing by our house. I said, why don't you come in for a cup of tea? And he came in, and Emma said to him, I said to Emma, this is Mike Weaver. And she said with a smile, it's all your fault, don't you? And so that was the reason. So it was lovely to be able to tell him. And I'd not told him and got to know him really well. And it was a really, really special moment. But yeah, Pursuit of Wild Trout, Cherry Brook. And that's why I always bang on about Cherry Brook, because it's very, very special to me.
Okay. We've sort of touched on it a little bit when you're talking about, you're fishing your perfect day. We've just touched on it again there. But, Emma, Can you tell me a bit more about Emma, her role with the magazine, fishing with her, kind of what she means to you, the positive impact she's had on your life?
It's been massive, and I kept asking Emma out for a long, long time, and I was rejected so many times. And I think I just wore her down in the end, and she agreed to go out with me. She is the light that I navigate home by, and she is. We've been married over 30 years now, and I listen to her wise counsel. I'm very gut-led person and instinct-led, and will go when I go. You got to hold on sometimes. And she is the wise counsel, and I run just about everything by her. She's also a grammar pedant, which is wonderful. And so she will go through the magazine with a fine tooth comb. And she is absolutely fabulous. And she'll tell me, and John will as well, I'll say I'm thinking about this, and she'll say, no, I'm thinking about that. And she'll say no, and she'll often say yes, but it's well reasoned, it's well thought out. And I love that. I love that she fishes. I love that she is the editor of the magazine. I sort of Anna Wintour it, as I wrote recently, and place and put everything together and choose the photos. But she makes sure that when that goes out, it's shipshape, and that's wonderful. And she'll tell me if there's a beautiful piece of writing as well, and I like that. She is just a fabulous woman, and I'm incredibly lucky that she's endured me for so long.
Yeah. Now, I mentioned she's also incredibly loyal to you, Pete, because when I did phone her, I was hoping to get some inside gossip on some horrible annoying habit you might have, biting the toenails in the bath, snoring. The worst she could come up with was your choice of footwear, in particular, something about Crocs and your habit of wearing them outside of the house.
Yeah, I've just taken to them. I tried them once. There's a story that my friend Ray and I were fishing in Colorado, and we had to have a guide to get a section to fish the Colorado. So we treated ourselves. We don't usually do this. We self-guide and figure it out ourselves, but we wanted to fish the Colorado. And this guy's turned up in these shoes, and I'm sitting, what the fuck is that? What's he wearing? And we'd not seen them before. They'd not hit the UK yet. And then we were at Denver Airport ready to fly home, and they were stacked at the airport. And he said, "This is your last chance, buddy." And I said, "No chance." Anyway, I bought another pair a little while and never wore them. And I wear Birkenstocks most of the time. And they're the most comfortable shoe. They're not great at off-roading. Now, they're great when I go fishing, but I'm a shambles when I set up and my wader. I don't put a mat down. I don't do anything. I'm surprised my waders last as long as they do, because I put them on in gravel and everything else. And I have slipped over in the Berkeys a few times. Although there was a wonderful story I was telling a friend the other day, that I was crossing Crediton High Street and I didn't judge the bus particularly well that was bearing down on me. Running in Birkenstocks is not great. And as I realised I needed to inject some much needed pace, that the Birkenstock came off. And as it rolled, I volleyed it onto the pavement. And a young lady walking along the pavement just looked at me and said, "Skills," as I made it onto the pavement intact. And I just said, "Yeah, I've still got it." And so I recently bought a pair of Crocs. I'm told they're on trend, so I didn't feel so bad about wearing them. When I went to Italy, there was a lot of people at the airport, so I'm wearing them now. I said to my friend Warren recently, actually, I'm touched that you didn't mention that I'm wearing them. But yeah, that's what I'm wearing now. It feels a bit strange. I try and be smart. I try to be well, I don't actually, but I try my utmost. And those are the little bit of a slip. And I did that classic thing of saying, "Cool, they're actually quite comfortable." So I think I was probably justifying the purchase. But yeah, I've been wandering around the streets. You'll see me in a petrol station, in a restaurant, wherever it is, walking in those. And yeah, I feel strangely comfortable doing that.
This whole croc thing has kind of passed me by. Then are they open toed, closed toed? Do you wear them with socks? Do you have to wear them with shorts, or can you wear long trousers with them?
I should say also that the Birkies are closed. So they're the clog version or whatever they call them. So they're closed. I don't think a man of a certain age should wear open-toed shoes. That's only a personal thing. I wear them with socks. So that's exactly how they stay from that point of view. So I think probably, yeah, with the socks and then just whatever fishing clothes that I'm going to be wearing for that day, or under the waders anyway.
I'm really relieved because when you were talking about your incident with the bus, I thought they were open toed. I can't wear open toed because of the fear of the toe jam. You know, where you go on, and it was like nails down a blackboard. Hearing you describe that, I thought any minute he's going to do the toe jam, and that'll just.
No, you're absolutely fine. There's no way. I wouldn't wish that on anybody from that. So no, I think they've got to be closed, and that's probably why the Crocs worked.
All right, cool. Now, obviously, talking to her, I actually freaked your daughter out because Emma's got really low. She's got no social media profile, so it's like, how do I get hold of her? But I found Charlie's details, her photography studio, and then had to message her and not sound like some stalker or serial killer. You know what I mean? But luckily, she didn't block me. She passed it on to Emma, and then Emma came back. So yeah, it was all secret squirrel, which was quite funny. But I understand your recent birthday, Pete. Emma got you quite a special present for your birthday. Do you mind just talking about that? What it was and why it was so special for you?
It would, and I think fishing is my life. It's been my life for 20 odd years, and your life can revolve around it. And I often say that, instead of saying shopping, I say fishing. Instead of dinner, I'll say fish, whatever that may be. And I think it's really important to step outside it for a while. When I was younger, much younger, I played in bands and I played keyboards. I played keyboards really badly. I'm not that terrible, but I've enjoyed doing them, and I played them since a teenager. And one of my musical influences, a huge one, has been Level 42 for most of my adult life, from my teens all the way through. And somehow Emma found me my hero. I have two musical heroes, but my keyboard playing hero is Mike Lindup from Level 42. And she got me a session to talk and play with him. And when she bought it for me, I went into negative worry spiral that I can't go, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough. And I then came around to the idea and said, sod it, let's give it a go. You live once, let's give it a go. And so I spent 2.5 hours. I turned up with some really nice cinnamon buns and croissants and coffee, and we sit and chatted and then talked about life. We talked about fishing, funnily enough, and he was very engaged about salmon farms. He knew exactly what was happening on with those. And we were in a little room, in a rehearsal room in Marylebone, and there was him, and it was amazing for me that before I knocked and walked in, I could hear him playing Level 42. There was just him and a grand piano in there, a small room. And I could hear him playing a Level 42. They're just on tour at the moment. So he's obviously rehearsing and had to listen to me banging on for a couple of hours. And it was amazing. I walked in and my hero was sitting there, and it went, from my point of view, it was, I was sort of worried I would say I love you, Mike Lindup, too much, and I didn't, which was wonderful. And getting the chance to meet him and tell him what the music meant to me. And I think this is really important for people to be able to tell people, because it means something to them. And being able to say some of the things that I said to him meant a lot. And it made me very emotional, but I had to say it to him. And being able to do that, and I played some songs and he even recognized them, which was great. And then he said, well, you need to play along to, help with your bits and pieces like that. I said, well, actually, I play along with your songs most of the time. So we talked about that, and I played some of their songs, and he was complimentary about most of them. Some he pulled me apart on a little bit in a nice, constructive, friendly, fun way. And I got the opportunity to spend time with him, and that I left on cloud nine. And I was incredibly nervous again coming into that, but it was wonderful to be able to do that. And that's another of the reasons that I'm so lucky to be married to Emma, to be able to experience these things, and to experience those things with somebody like that who meant so much to you.
Okay. Pete, I hope you're comfortable talking about this, but I'm also aware that, your love of music and that particular musical instrument played a big role in your recovery from a medical emergency you suffered. Was it about 10 years ago?
Yeah, I think it's coming up 10 years. I can't tell you the date. It may have passed actually, but I can't tell you the date. But yes, it did a huge part.
I was just wondering if you're happy to do it, could you maybe take us back 10 years, set the scene for us where you are and when you sort of first got an inkling that there was something not right?
It'd been brewing for a little bit for me, and I'd been on a road trip with my daughter to Montana, and we were going to Skype Emma the first morning, and I nearly fainted, and I've never fainted in my life, and I still managed to go out in a drift boat and catch some fish on the Yellowstone, but my head was pounding a little bit, and I was taking a lot of ibuprofen and stuff like that, and it did settle down after a while. And I was on a river called the River Bray in Devon. It's a tributary of the Tor, and I've talked a little bit about this on a podcast I did with my Life in 10 fly rods, but it was as if somebody had run at me from behind and hit me on the back of the head with a cricket bat. And my body slowed down, and I thought, this is it. And I laid down. And I said in my mind goodbye to Emma. I said goodbye to Charlie, our daughter. I saw, and this isn't BS, I saw a sea trout swim by, and I thought, this is a bit young, 48's a bit young, but this is how I choose it. I felt incredibly calm and thought, right, well, this will be it. They'll find me. There's no phone signal. They'll find me. And somehow something snapped through. I obviously survived what had happened. I had no idea what had happened. I somehow managed to drive to South Molton. I thought, well, I don't know what it is, but I'll get a Lucozade and a bar of chocolate, parked up and ate and drunk them and threw them up. And then I got home, and I must have looked like The Walking Dead because I had my waders around my knees, and I walked in and I said to Emma, something's not right. I don't know what it is, perhaps. And it turned out I sort of was a bit, Emma had been on to the doctors and they called me in. Oh, we went to emergency at the hospital. I forget many of these things now. And it didn't, they sort of sent me home again, and Emma phoned the doctor, and the doctor said something's not right. They got me in and said, right, we're getting you in. Now, it turned out they did a load of tests, and it turned out I had something called a subarachnoid hemorrhage. Now, it is a nasty one in that 50% of people, when it happens, don't survive. Of those 50% of survivors, 50% of those die afterwards. And then 50% of those who survive that don't regain everything as a result of that. So I felt extremely lucky that I managed somehow to get through it. And there are still some things I get, when it's busy, I get a little bit tired. And I'm tired from the last couple of days. I notice sometimes my left side, even when I'm figure of eighting, I find difficult sometimes. Single spay with a double hander with my left hand up, I struggle. And you'd think I'd never picked up a rod before. Yeah, my right side, I'm absolutely fine. But that's, I have to do it cross cack-handed and it works. I'm extremely lucky. And so, when I met Mike, I got the chance to say to him, thank you. and I was almost in tears, and it may have registered with him. Think it may have done. And I said, look, I've got to tell you this. It's really important. And so I decided I bought myself a keyboard and started playing again. And that helped me through a very, very difficult time. This is perhaps, I kept Eat, Sleep, Fish going. I never missed a thing. I kept going. And I was out home and I was catching salmon. I can't tell you, that's all a bit hazy for me, those things. So this to me is really important. This is why communities are really important to me. This is why friendship's really important to me. This is why fishing's really important to me, because it could have been taken away from me. And so that's why I keep trying to push on and do something positive for our pastime. And the magazine is that. If I could give fly culture away, I would. I would do that. It's to give something back to something that means so much to me that could have been taken away from me. And so that's why it's so incredibly important to me. And I would also say this, that what it did was make me realize that everyone's dealing with stuff. So this isn't just a story about me. Everyone's dealing with shit. And I think sometimes it's difficult to not realize that and realize that everyone is having to carry something. And so be it, and I often say on here, give somebody a call, look out for somebody, invite them fishing, because it may help them. And it may be, I had an extreme thing, and many people have extreme things that they have to deal with. And so if we can help them through those difficult times, then I think that's really, really key. And one of the things, funnily enough, was amazing when I was in hospital, that they moved me off the high risk ward onto when it looked like I was going to get through this okay. And there was a guy, and I walked to the toilet, and there's a guy had a fishing magazine, and it was a fly fishing one. And I spoke to him and he said, I was hoping to take it up. I said, I'm a fishing guide. Now we kept contact. He had something slightly different, but I didn't hear back. And I always worry and I think about what that guy's doing now, because I think I could have got him into fishing so that he feels the way that we do about it. And I pray it wasn't a hemorrhage, it was something else. And I pray that he has got through that. But yeah, if anyone listening, look out for people, be good to people, be nice to people, and try. And you can't, I spend a lot of my life I'm a pleaser, and I like to please people and be good to people. Sometimes it doesn't work, and they think there's an ulterior motive. There isn't with myself, and it is down the line. People can piss you off, and you still walk away for a bit, but you can come back and you can say, look, let's hang out, let's do this, let's do that. And I think that's really, really important, to care about other people. So yes, it was a life-changing thing, but everyone's going through this. So I don't want it to be, yes, it was something that happened to me, and I know we're talking about me, but these things happen to everybody, and taking the time to call somebody or take them fishing, I think is really, really key. And telling people what they mean to you as well. And with Mike, I was very fortunate to be able to tell him that. And that was a wonderful feeling. And I'm going to see with my childhood friends, actually, we're going to go and see them. And I'm about to write to him and say, look, if you play a particular tune in Southend and somebody screams like Ned Flanders, that's probably me.
Okay, Pete, that's really, and I think, as you say, it's a universal thing. Everyone is going through different things, but I think what we can take from your experience is the recovery process. What was your sort of motivation? Because I think it would have been easy to give up or feel the world is against you, or be downbeat after a kind of bolt of lightning hitting you like that from nowhere. So can you just talk us through the recovery process and kind of how you focused, and what was your drive to get better and improve your situation?
I think for me, I've always been one of those sorts of people who's you dust yourself down and you get on with it again, and you think, right, I've been given quite a big chance here, So you've got to go for it. You've got to go for it. You've got to do those things. And that initial recovery process, no matter what you're going through, there can be highs and lows with it. And there were times where I was just too tired to do anything. And both Emma and our daughter Charlie, who you mentioned, could see that I looked grey when I wasn't feeling good. And sometimes it is hard to get out of bed, but I'm the person who will always get out of bed. And I will try and get out of bed. And there were days when you can't, but I would do it anyway. And I would try my utmost to do that. And, I was out, I caught salmon. Emma would tell you, again, I get confused with how long, it wasn't that long after being out of hospital. I was catching salmon. And so those sorts of things were a motivation. The things like eat, sleep, fish were a motivation. Being able to fish and being able to do those things as best as you possibly can in those circumstances are exactly what I was trying to do. And so you've got to, I'm not the sort of person who takes it slowly, unfortunately. I am right, we'll do this, I'm going to do it, and that's it. It's determination to be able to do that. Interestingly, they said to me that I think the whole process for me wasn't, I couldn't figure out what had happened to me. The most frightening thing was that they said, we're going to do a scan there. We're going to take you up. If we find another something else on your brain, we're going to have to put you under. You need to understand if there is something, there's a 50% chance it's going to pop and you're going to die. And I couldn't tell Emma. And so I sat there for however long it was with my fingers crossed. And thankfully, it was clear. That was the most frightening aspect of that. And, I just burst into tears when Emma visited me because of what I'd just been through. But those sorts of things sort of make you think, right, well, I'm going to grab this. I'm going to go for it. And like I said to you with fishing, everything, I try really, really hard to say yes to everything. There are times when you can't, and there are times when life gets in the way. And sometimes it's easy to get into a routine with how you feel about things, but it's good to step outside it just to say, yeah, okay, I'm going to do this, and say, what the hell? And I think that's anyone listening that I hopefully haven't bored with this too much, just enjoy it and do it. And don't regret it. Regret the things you did do, not the things you don't do.
And I think just following on from that, Pete, were you conscious of sort of priorities changing after what happened? Did certain things become more important to you? Did other things become less important?
I think it's always been family, friends, and fishing, really. And I could do it. There was a very, very good chance I wouldn't be able to fish. And so I got through that and I was okay. So I could fish. My family mean absolutely everything to me, as do friends as well. And being able to see them, and so many people came and visited just to check I was okay. And that meant the world to me. And being able to, spend time around them is really, really important.
Okay. Pete, I'm conscious of time. We saw at the beginning this wasn't going to turn into a mutual loving between us. But, as I said earlier, I'd given up on writing. You helped me find my voice in an audience. Through the magazine, I've met and fished with some amazing people, which has given me a lot of happiness. And I don't think I'm unique in this. I think many, many other of the contributors to the magazine and readers feel exactly the same way as I do. And, it's down to you, Pete, and your team as well, that help you produce the magazine each month. So on behalf of not just me, but all the writers and photographers whose work you've published, all those voices you've made heard, the brotherhood and sisterhood you've created around the magazine, all these people you've brought together, the issues you've championed as well in the magazine to draw people's attention to some of the wrongs of it. I just want to say, fuck the lovinometer, Pete, because it's going to explode in a minute. But I just want to say, thank you. And you do have superpowers, Pete, and you are my hero.
This has been, as you know, it's been incredibly difficult for me to do this. I don't like limelight. And it may sound really weird. There's a guy who does a magazine and he does, but in the magazine, you won't see me in there. And even with the podcast, I just want to bring out the people who are the guests. It's about them. It's not about me. And this is, it's probably the most uncomfortable I've ever been on the podcast, but it's also been lovely to speak and, to be able to, it's good to help people and to shout about things and to get things done. We seem to sometimes live in a world where people are angry about things you don't need to be angry about. Do the things that matter and make a stand. Don't be afraid to stand up for stuff. And I think with the mag that we've really tried hard to do that. And, I know you're a contributor of the magazine, and all of the contributors mean the world to me. And when they send me something, it is really thrilling to be able to do that and to be able to pay them for their work as well, because that's really, really, if I could pay more, I would. And as the magazine, it continues to grow, I want to pay them more. It's not, this for me hasn't, and you'll get the gist of this, I guess, this whole thing hasn't been about money. The fly culture is not about money. It's not something that there's a grand plan to sell this on or do whatever it is. I would like to give somebody an opportunity with this when it comes along to have a go at the role that I'm doing, the roles that Emma are doing. That would be really cool. All we care about is being able to print the magazine every quarter, which we can do. And that's not a problem, and to pay contributors for their hard work, because that's extremely important to me. Your book, and I'm only a small part in it. And, when you said read the front, and when it said for Pete, I asked who. And I burst into tears again. I don't mind admitting it when you said that, because I didn't realise you meant that. And I read that, to be a small part of that journey is wonderful with yourself and others, and to be able to ride that roller coaster with everyone is really cool. So, with fly culture, it's just going to keep rocking, and as long as people keep loving it, then we'll keep putting it out. That's all I really want to do.
As you said, we're loving what you're doing, so keep on doing what you're doing. I've really enjoyed talking to you and having this opportunity for you to share something so personal with us and take us on the journey. And I really appreciate you opening up and for indulging me as well. I really appreciate that. So all that's left for me to say is thank you for listening to this episode of the Fly Culture Podcast. Keep buying the magazine, keep listening to the podcast, keep being excellent to each other. And all that's left for me to say is cue Emma.
The Fly Culture Podcast is brought to you in association with Fly Culture, a quarterly published magazine owned and run by fly anglers. When it comes to fly fishing, we've got you covered.